because let's go to Ding Dang.
Okay.
That's a great way to transition to Ding Dang, I think. And that is, we're making the turn to the fall 2024 installment. Ding Dang. I mean, you want to like just jotting down some things like you want to talk about the power of marketing, the power of branding to like make like a pop cult something now in terms of the merchandise that spurred on the store. This you've got stories that we will hopefully talk about forever. Song title as well. In many installments of this program to come. But the story behind how this issue came to be might be one of my personal favorites.
So yeah, I see this announcement of Ding Dang coming to Brian's website. I don't know what it means. I'm looking at the different communities and whatnot and how people are responding to it. And one of the kind of common themes was that people were hoping that meant like demos were coming, or we would, or maybe even that meant was like an announcement of a box set or something, because there's a large faction of Brian fans out there that really love the Love You album and that period. And so here's a button. There's a Ding Dang button. And so I my initial reaction to it, which I write in the editor's notes, is I kind of was like, huh, it's kind of a like I don't know what this is going to be, but there's really nothing about it that excites me whatsoever. Well, I did like the artwork. And I just assumed Mark London had done it because Mark, for those who don't know, Mark London has been Brian Wilson's tour program designer. He's designed posters and tour programs for Brian throughout his touring career. So I just automatically thought, oh, Mark, this must be Mark. And I reached out to him. He said, no, I didn't design it. I think it came from Design Site, which is Michael DeMartin and Design Site run Brian's website. So I poked around and asked some questions, and Michael said, yeah, actually, my daughter designed it. And I still, without knowing what this was going to be, I just was starting like, huh. But what it made me do is I decided to go listen to Love You. And I listened to the Love You album. Then I listened to the Adult Child album, which I have. And then I listened to the various versions of Ding Dang and its kind of evolution. And then I happened to find, because when you listen to certain things on YouTube or watch certain things on YouTube, then you kind of get a feed on your side of like recommendations. And one of the things was Roger McGuinn talking to Jacob Dylan from the Echo in the Canyon documentary, and all of a sudden it was there, and he's talking about the Ding Dang, and I went, what? So I bring that up and I watch it, and I'm like, oh my God. So I just thought, okay, this is like kismet. I'm supposed to do this now. So I transcribed what Roger said. And then I looked at I went into this new Genesis publication book and I looked at what was said in there. And then I thought, I'm going to go back. I've been doing ESQ for so long, is going back to 2007 and repurposing something okay? And I asked myself that question, and I thought it's almost 15 years ago. I think it's fair enough that I can do that. I very seldomly have done it. I'm going to actually do that again soon. But I decided to do it because the interviews I had for the Love You edition back in '07 were so good. I mean, engineer Earl Mankey and my interviews with Brian and Al were so good. I just thought this, I want to tie this all together and just make this a fun, lighthearted edition because, and I think I touched on that last edition with the summer one, I ended up doing just almost primarily a full review and it was almost just news and reviews with the exception of the interview that I did with Frank and Mike and Al. And so it was kind of I ended up really liking that I did an edition that was the summer one, that was not a deep dive focus into an album or an issue dedicated to someone that's passed away. The heaviness wasn't there. And I liked that. I liked the lack of the heaviness. And so Ding Dang is this 57-second lighthearted romp that I just thought, okay, I'm going to use that as the springboard for what I'm doing, and I did, and I loved, and then I wasn't sure because then you start to lay out when I'm laying out these magazines. There's 48 pages to fill up, so that's a part of what I'm dealing with. Is this enough to justify what I'm doing? And then of course I had, like as you say, a lot of letters that I had to catch up on because I didn't use them in the last issue. So it's like I think it was 7 or 8 pages worth of letters, and so I had that, and then I had this content, and I formulated the interviews with Brian, Al, and Earl differently than how they appeared in '07. Because in '07, I had them as separate pieces. And this time I combined them as one long narrative. So they were all kind of piggybacking and talking, which I love doing. I love getting my subjects together and having them have a conversation, which has been something I've honed and worked on over the years since that time. I just love doing. I like it, a collective conversation, and so I like the way that turned out. And then Michael DeMartin provided me with the artwork and the development of the logo and how they developed it. So that turned out to be a nice kind of behind the scenes part of this. And then Amanda Metzger, who's one of our new writers and assistant editors and with Endless Summer Quarterly, I looked at her background and I was impressed by it. And she's an award-winning writer, and she said, "I'd like to write something." I thought, well, here's a challenge.
She rose to it. She rose to that challenge.
She really, really did. So I sent her the different versions of Ding Dang, the earlier versions, the working versions and stuff. I mean, so she listened to them, and I had to tweak and kind of steer her once or twice, like, okay, talk as though, don't speak as, when you write this, you can't speak as though everybody's heard these, because not everyone has. A lot of collectors have, but you can't talk that way because not everyone has. So you just have to speak about them musically and what you heard and how the differences. So I worked with her on that, and she really did rise to the occasion. She's a tremendous writer, and I'm thrilled to have her on board. She did a great job, and it's such an obscure thing as a first assignment. It's just it's a beautifully strange recording, and it speaks so directly to who Brian was at that time in his life.
Again, the goal here for our program, we're not trying to give away the issue if you haven't read it yet, but we want to talk about some of the things that are in there and get more of the story behind the story. One of the things, there's often great art and effect that comes from things that are maybe seemingly at odds with each other as concepts that come together. Like, there's real beauty in that contradiction. Like, could there be anything more whimsical than the way this Ding Dang thing sprung to life? And yet you've got the story in there about the care that went into selecting and working on the image of Brian that was part of the Ding Dang artwork. And it's just like, okay, this might appear like whimsical and fun, but there was care and attention to detail to make sure it worked that went into it. It wasn't random, and it didn't just happen, even if it is light. And I think that's a wonderful kind of lesson for anyone, regardless of what field you're in, about the importance of intentionality and purpose and a sense of direction and focus. And again, it's one of those things, like, even the stuff that seems spontaneous, none of it happens by accident.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great point. And we were talking about Jan and Dean a little bit ago. So Jan and Dean are a perfect example of that. The music they did quite a bit of music where if anybody were to search YouTube and like look up Jan and Dean, You Really Know How to Hurt a Guy, and look for the video of them in Hawaii. They went to, I think it was Honolulu, but they're in Hawaii and they're performing that song, lip syncing, obviously. But they're this outdoor event, and there's a bunch of hula dancers around them. And for anyone who knows the song You Really Know How to Hurt a Guy, it's a power ballad, more or less, and Jan's singing it, and he's walking out this long platform, and he's being this romantic crooner type. Now, Dean is behind him falling off the stage, okay? And then climbing back up and guffawing the whole time. Because, number one, Dean didn't care for the song. But number two, Jan and Dean were a comedy act to a degree. At no time, though, did Jan and Dean not take what they were doing seriously. They took what they were doing very seriously. So that's the lesson to what you're talking about. Everything, even the light stuff takes, you know, there is always intention behind something, you know, and I will say, once I got the mug, the ding dang mug, I drink out of it several times a week. I love it. I mean, it's just the nicest mug. I mean, and then I saw people. I haven't opened that, but I got the towel and I got the shirt.
You talked about the quality was really impressive.
Yeah, yes. And then then I had to. I saw they finally did choose some winners to receive autographed posters from Brian, but we did our own selection in the back of the issue because the one guy, oh my gosh, anyone on Instagram, you got to go check this guy out. The poor soul, he was so brave. He just had a towel around his waist that he bought, the ding dang towel, coming out of the shower. And he says, I've humiliated myself to the point where my parents liked this post. And it's just, I absolutely love it. I think he should have won. I told Michael DeMartin this guy should be, they didn't choose him, but I don't know why. But I definitely thought he should win. And I don't know where I'm still trying to work on a way to get him involved as a subscriber, because if he subscribes, I'll give him something. I don't know how to do. I'm still working on that, but we're actually going to be giving away our own Ding Dang merch. We have a couple of T-shirts, a hat, a mug, a towel, and if I'm not mistaken, a couple of signed posters are on their way to my care as well. So we'll see what we have in the end, but we're going to be doing that in the next, either through online. I haven't figured that out yet. We'll either do it online or throughout in the next edition.
Well, coming attraction. Stay tuned.
Yeah, yes, coming attraction. That's right, coming attraction.
Coming attraction. You know, you mentioned Echo in the Canyon briefly. For anyone who's watching this who hasn't seen that documentary, I thought that documentary was both terrific and left me wanting so much more. They probably could have done a complete thing focusing on just the Beach Boys themselves if they really think about it. That wasn't really, but it just, there was so much richness to that. And, you know, just, it sounds like we're not paid endorsers of anything, folks. We are just passionate individuals who like to consume a lot of media and can't get enough information and media and entertainment on this stuff. So, but Echo in the Canyon, I thought, you know, is really something that there's gems in there, and there's probably, you could almost probably do, you know, if anyone has like an extra day in LA, you could do a scavenger hunt of Echo in the Canyon and probably just spend it all on that boulevard and have fun. And, you know, you get some of the stuff from Brian's documentary too, of like the drive up. And it's just, you want to talk about, you know, being rooted in a place. Man, that comes to life.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, if you don't know, I imagine everyone would, but Canyon being Laurel Canyon. Yes. And there's so much history there. It's kind of mind-boggling. It's just what I wouldn't have given to be a teenager or in my early 20s, in the mid 60s, to be and live there. I'd probably not remember it. Was it Robin Williams who said if you can remember the 60s, you weren't there?
Yeah. I saw that surface somewhere very recently. So yeah, that sounds about right. You know, it also, you know, it gave an opportunity to the issue. You talk also about Brian's 82nd birthday party, and we touched upon that a little bit earlier. But I think you kind of felt like you were there reading that in the magazine. It really, because you talked about the condition. You could read the news stories, but you know, there is a real window into not just him, but you talked about some of the musicians, like you know, his band put together multiple sets in what was a California heat wave, and you know, it just you get the sense without much imagination required of just the overarching amount of care and love and appreciation and you know, commitment that goes into something like that. And I think it was just a really cool thing to have. You had a variety of perspectives on that. I think that's one of the things that's, you know, as someone who started my affiliation with ESQ as a subscriber and a consumer and a fan of it, nothing you do is unilateral or one dimension. You always have, like, you know, and I just think it's soapbox for a second, but for a group that you're covering that is about harmony, it's not an overstatement to say there's a great harmony that you strive for to give accompaniment and texture to whatever your primary subject is. And I think that comes to life even for something as simple, seemingly, as covering a 82nd birthday bash for Brian Wilson. So
That's the
kudos.
intention. Thank you. That's the intention. I was heartened when I saw the different posts that were suddenly happening from the different things. And so that's what I like to do if I can do it. It's the same thing that was true with the documentary premiere at the Chinese Theater. If I can pull these different posts together and kind of put them together so that the fans are having this opportunity to experience the different perspectives in kind of several pages of one another, so that we feel, again, this goes back to that collective narrative, right? So where everyone's saying something, a David Leaf, a Mark London, a Carney Wilson, just this love. Everyone that I've ever met who's a Beach Boy fan loves Brian. I don't know if he even sees ESQ, but if he does, I want him to know by opening up the book or even looking at the cover how much he's loved. And I've told him so. So I know that he knows that I love him. But I think it's important. That's me. That's me. Just genuinely speaking. That's what I want. I want fans to feel like they're there, like they have a pass, like they're getting insight. But it's also very important to me that, and it's not just the word harmony, it's the experience of being a part of something, right? Something good, something that makes us feel good, regardless of it doesn't matter what album you like. Again, this goes back to what we're talking about. It's this foundation. It's the fact that you like the Beach Boys. That's the foundational element of it. It's the music. If it weren't for the music, none of us would even. Period. There is no discussion without it. So without Brian Wilson sitting in his converted garage back at his parents' house, sitting at the piano and dissecting Four Freshmen records, we wouldn't be here. If not for him. If not for him turning to his cousin and saying, my brother Dennis said we ought to write a surfing song. Let's write a surfing song. So again, it's just all, and then look what it became. And we were talking about the documentary. I'm just going to come back to one incredible moment in that documentary. First of all, I love the way they did that when they changed the members. They would do the little tear.
Yeah, the cutters, yes.
I love that. And then the other thing that I loved, although I don't quite understand her inclusion, Monet. But I love the way that the documentary communicated Brian. It really helped me revisit Brian's love for Phil Spector. And once he heard Be My Baby, we got Don't Worry Baby. And if you listen to Don't Worry Baby, you can hear Be My Baby in it with the boom. And it is one of the Brian's early crowning achievements is Don't Worry Baby. There's a lot of other songs around that period that are beautiful and great and well written. We know them well. But Don't Worry Baby is when Brian Wilson said, get ready. Put the seatbelt on, because from here on out, it's different territory. And he wrote it as a car song, but it's so much more. It is just so much more. And it wasn't long before we had When I Grow Up to Be a Man. And I'm telling you, that's another one that every time I hear it, it represents, when I was young, it represented, I'm almost that old now. But as a song, as a structure, it just blows the lid off of anything of its time. It really, really does. So that feeling that we get from a song, if you're sitting with somebody and you like a song and you're both talking about the same song that you like, that's wonderful, because you're speaking with you're having a like-minded conversation. But if you're having a conversation and you like something that maybe I don't like as much, and vice versa, that's perfectly okay. The fact is that the music speaks to us. That right on any level. My favorite Beach Boy song is Essence, which is not about love.
Yeah.
It's not about cars. It's not about surfing. It's not about girls. It's about the building of the railroad and the Grand Coulee Dam. It's got nothing. It's American. It's basically a Norman Rockwell painting to me in musical
Yeah.
form. And I love that. There's nothing like it of its kind anywhere ever that's ever been recorded or written on the face of the earth. It's one of a kind. And I absolutely, hands down, it's the best thing for me that's ever been written or recorded by anyone. And so I love a lot of music. A lot of music. So that to me, for Cabin Essence to be the top of the tier is a significant thing to me. But I love it all.
You know, one of the, there's got a lot there. I mean, one of the common threads there, one of the common threads, because it's doing all of them a disservice, but columnist in the New York Times about 2012, when the reunion tour was happening, but was actually writing about seeing Springsteen in Europe, David Brooks, and he talked about the power of the particular. And this stuck with me in what I do. And he said, he had seen Springsteen in Europe, and he's like, why is it? He wrote an article saying, why is it that the fans seeing Springsteen in Europe are more into Springsteen and more lively than the Springsteen fans seeing him in concert in the US? And his answer was basically because he creates these worlds and brings them to life so vividly that, you can imagine it. And when you're a kid, you have this wild imagination of something. And he actually cites the Beach Boys in the article. And he goes, maybe that's why acts like Springsteen and the Beach Boys, and he names a few others, are still filling out stadiums and arenas, while some of these newer groups are kind of fly by. And he wasn't making an old new thing as much as like the particular, because there's a lot of great new music out there too. But his point would be, are you creating a distinctive flavor, or is it more kind of one of one, as opposed to, no, you're rooting these distinctive worlds and places. And that's and I think you just described, okay, this song is this, as opposed, and it takes you to a distinctive place. It's Norman Rockwell painting for you. Like that is, and it's the influence of Brian, you talk about surfing, where it all right? Surfing. Dennis had the idea. And one of the things that's in one of these issues that shines through is, and it was like a tertiary point that was being made by your subjects, was like, he would take a suggestion from Carl, or he would take a suggestion from Al, having listened to something from Kingston Trio, or the influence of the Four Freshmen, or the influence of, Phil Spector. And it's just, he was able to kind of absorb it, process it, and make something so uniquely and distinct. But it was this, there was very little, didn't matter where it's clear that it really, as it relates to the product, did not matter where a good idea came from.
That's right, because that just goes back to understanding Brian Wilson. Well, at least at that stage in his life, he was open. He was a sponge. I'm working on the next two editions of ESQ are going to be about Brian Wilson Productions, and it's a deep dive. And it's interesting. One of the questions that I asked of Marilyn Wilson Rutherford, Brian's first wife, mother of Carney and Wendy Wilson, he was doing so much in 62, 63. Not only were they putting out album after album after, there was one point where there was 3 weeks apart, they released 2 albums, which is absurd. And I said to her, my God, Brian was like spearheading the Beach Boys at the same time, and he was touring with them at that point still. At the same time, he's working with Jan and Dean, he's working with Bob Norberg, he's working with Dave Nolan, Richard Larian, and Bob Norberg as the Survivors. He's doing all these Sharon Marie, he's doing all these outside peripheral things. Do you think he was spreading himself too thin? To which she said, I'm only paraphrasing, no. Yeah. He was on fire. He was this young, I can't even imagine. I remember when I was that age, at my best, I never could have pulled that off. So just to imagine, to your point, just this pure absorption. Let's do a song about surfing. Let's. Hey, Brian, what do you think about doing Sloop John, the wreck of the Sloop John B? And then talk about amazing that Brian, if you listen to Kingston Trio Sloop John B, it's a whole different song. It's a whole different song. And Al had no idea what Brian was doing with it. And I love the fact the Beach Boys are in Japan for the first time, January 1966. They haven't heard the mix yet. They worked on it in December. If you've ever seen the black and white photos where Brian's wearing the horn rimmed glasses and they're all around the studios, those photos are used a lot. That's them in late December after Christmas of 1965. And the reason I know that for a fact, no one's ever told me that. If you look closely, Brian's in the booth next to the engineer, and there's containers of eggnog.
There you go.
These little things we have to look for.
You're a regular Columbo.
I got a question. So that was the end of the Sloop John B sessions. Thanks, Andrew Doe's Bellagio site, let me point out. So I was able to tie that together. They go to Japan for the first time. Brian's, of course, by that time, no longer a touring member. Bruce is with them at this point. They go over, and Brian, I guess, mails them a disc of it or something for them to hear. So they're at the Japan welcoming party, and they are hearing Sloop John B for the first time over the speakers at this Capitol Records Japan welcoming party. And they're like, holy crap. It's not just because the arrangement, because it gets to the point in the song where the track drops out and it's just their voices, and they're like, wow. Can you imagine being on tour, not having heard it, and being like at a press junket and like hearing that for the first time and thinking, oh my God, we've been thinking we're really, really good.
Yeah.
We just did it again. we just did something else we didn't know we were going to do, all because of Brian. You know, he just has this, it's just moments like that. I mean, how did Brian it's one thing to communicate to musicians like the Wrecking Crew or to Carl, because by that time, Carl was the one guy who'd come into the booth, plug his guitar in, and work with the Wrecking Crew. By that point, because Brian was using them because the Beach Boys were on tour. And musically speaking, the Beach Boys weren't, with the exception of Carl, weren't quite up to snuff. Bruce could have done what was required because of his background, but they'd be on tour, so Brian wanted to continue working and needed somebody to work with. So it's not a slight against the Beach Boys' abilities that he continued to work with professional studio musicians, but just the idea that it's one thing to be able to communicate to people what you're thinking, to have something carried out and executed, but it's Brian at the board with his hand on the slider and just deciding to drop the track out.
Yeah. It's
just Brian going, oh, just the voices, yeah. And then learning that on Wouldn't It Be Nice, he was never happy with it. Huh?
Yeah.
That blows my mind, and how hard they worked on that. But that's the other thing. We're getting a little off track, but that's okay. The great thing that I would tell anyone about the Beach Boys that is significantly their own, that maybe other groups did it after them because they picked up on it. The Beach Boys were the best at, and the first group to, use their voices as instruments. And that really came into being for me on Wouldn't It Be Nice, where they're singing Run, Run, Wee You. Which is, when I first heard that song many years ago, I thought, what are they saying?
Yeah.
And I had to get the lyrics. I was like, what are they saying there? And of course, it's not in the lyrics because it's not a lyric. And I just thought, that's making me crazy. Because I think at some point early on in our lives, when we hear a song, we get the lyrics of something wrong and we're singing them wrong. And we discover later on in life that we had it wrong all along. But that was one of those things. And then, so by the time you get to Sunflower, it's like the whole group gets the whole idea of using one another's voices as a part of the sound, right? And implementing the voice structure as an instrumental element into the execution of what's going to be on the recording. And that's kind of how I build ESQ. I grew up on booking records. I had the Marvel records. You came with a 45 and you'd read along, and it would, Power Records presents Captain America and the Falcon in A Phoenix Shall Arrive. Captain America and Falcon on night patrol. And then you have the voices of the actors who are doing their voices, and it would go so far and go ding, you turn the page. So that's how I got, when I started doing ESQ. It took me several years, but I loved doing the issues that are albums, because the whole idea for me is I want people. It's like I keep my records in sleeves, right? Like a plastic sleeve. So the idea is I want people to take their ESQs, their Pet Sounds ESQ, and put it in there. So when they get their record out, they're going to read the magazine while they're listening to the album. And that's just the whole concept of it. Like it's a book and record. It's a companion piece.
Some other great things in these two issues we've been talking about, just they might seem like loose ends, but I think worth, informing our friends about. But you've got some images of the Club Kokomo after party, that and I'll tell you, as someone who bought, I've gone to that twice, once last year, once earlier. Like, it is, I don't think there's any act anywhere that is giving you the meet and greet experience that you get from that, and that's before you even get into the beverage tasting. Mike, the whole group, like, Mike is there to answer your questions, and he wants to make sure that it's almost like it's the reverse of almost any other one of those things I've done with any other act, where it's like, okay, let's make sure you get your photo and then we'll get you out of here, but at least you got your photo. It's almost like they've got to remember to make time for the photo, and they're breaking up actual conversation that is being had between Mike and others, and the people who have gone to this thing. It is really just an amazing experience if anyone has the opportunity to do it, where you can learn about some of the very things we're talking about. There is carte blanche to ask questions. The entire staff was so gracious. They're like, please, make sure you ask Mike any question you want. And it's, wow, they mean it. They're not just saying it, they mean it and live it.
It's rarefied air. And that's why I thought it was so important to include it in the news section in the last issue, was when I saw it, and I've been backstage, spent so many conversations with Mike over the years. I never take it for granted. It's always an honor and a privilege to do so. I've conducted interviews with him after a show a number of times when he's exhausted, and he still gives me his time and his energy. I've seen him. I've known Mike for over 30 years now, and I've seen a different person. It makes perfect sense on one hand that, okay, sure, this is his brand. This is something that he's trying to get going, his Club Kokomo Spirits, that he and his son Brian love, and their friend Jeff Longnecker, who owns the distillery that Mike purchased shares of, and to develop this whole line of drinks. So on the one hand, from the branding perspective, well, of course, this is something Mike is behind. He wants it to do well. I think it's probably of all the different ventures Mike has gotten into over the years, this is far and away the most level, well-branded, good thing that he's done. They sent me in 2022 when they first started it. I guess Brian and Jeff sent me all the different flavors, the 4-packs of all the different flavors. I don't drink, but I did take a sip of a couple of them just to see what they tasted like. I thought they were good. They were gone. I had family come into town for Thanksgiving. They wanted more. That's all I know, is they went through them really quick and kept telling me, oh, I really like this Afternoon Delight one the most. Do you have any more? No, you've drank them all. They're gone. They only sent me so many. You got a little carried away. But they were good. So that was this overall, everybody who was drinking them. They went fast. And I thought, okay, this tells me what they've done is a home run. Because if you drink and you enjoy spirits, and if you taste something that you don't enjoy, that's it. Whether it's beer or a mixed drink or whatever it is, if you don't like it, it's not. But the family loved them. They loved them. And then this idea that you can buy. Now, I've, like you, and I'm sure like many people who've ever paid for a meet and greet or been backstage for a meet and greet with the photo option, typically you get herded through like cattle. And anyone watching this, I will tell you, be the last in line, always. Okay. That may seem like counterproductive. Trust me when I say, no matter who you're getting your photo with, be the last in line. Because whether it's true or not, I believe me, it's true. I've watched it happen enough times. You will have 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it is, more than everyone in front of you, because you're the last one, and you will have more time. Unless it's like the show's about to start and they have to get you out because the show's about to start. Even then, you'll have an extra 5 to 10 seconds that nobody else in front of you had. So be the last in line. That's the best recommendation I can give anyone. Now, what I read, and from what I know, speaking with Brian Love, Jeff, and Mike, so I knew about these drinks. I know how well everyone loved them. And then I'm seeing this on Mike's Facebook page and the Club Kokomo Spirits social media, this experience that people are paying for. They're going to a show, they're being entertained, and then after the show, when the guy has every right just to get on the bus and leave, right? They could do it like if it's a long show with an intermission, he could come out, pop out and say, enjoy your drink, see you later. And here's my picture, see ya. He doesn't do that. He puts on a full show, then comes out, helps in some cases, serves the drinks if it needs to happen. He gets involved, and then he sits down with everybody and says, "What'd you think of the show? What would you like to ask?" And he's just this, and he sits there and he's just this open book. Now, where are you going to get that anywhere on earth? You just don't. When I saw that, that's why I did what I did in the latest issue and dedicated a page to it, because I just thought, my God. And I even wrote something to that degree. It was that this is unheard of, that you're getting to have a drink with Mike. You're basically, and now I don't know if he actually has his own drink or not, but that would just speak to how tired he is and how hydrated he is. Because he's got to be sensible. I mean, he is 83 years old.
And like I said, they just did 27 days in August.
I mean, it's just nuts. I mean, this is why I went like this. The guy at some point is gonna, something inside the makeup is gonna go, hold on, time out. But I mean, I'm amazed by him from the endurance element of it. He just loves what he does, and it's not just it's one thing to stand in front of an audience and get that give and take from performance to adulation, and then you're seeing people dance and enjoy themselves, and you're providing that joy. But then to go out afterwards and to sit with people, a handful of people, and to just talk to them and be their buddy. So how long did it last? Was it like a half an hour, or what's the?
I'm in a ballpark. It was like 20 to 25 minutes.
Okay.
But which, I mean, that's like, which makes it about 18 minutes more to 23 minutes more than you
get
the
standard meet
else.
and greet. Exactly.
Yeah.
The standard meet and greet when you're getting herded through like cattle. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a real, it was a substantive session for at least, I'm gonna say 20 minutes.
Yeah. And it's, I'm thinking this, so I'm going to say it. It's, I wish, and hopefully I would think anybody who spends the money to do that would really truly want the experience and would enjoy the experience. I would imagine so. I just wish more people were keen on going to see Mike in concert, because and would do this, because that type of having a drink that the guy created or had a hand in creating, having a drink with the guy who helped create the drink, and then sit there and drink and then talk to him and shoot the shit is just, I mean, I've had that experience. Not the drinking element of it, but just shooting the shit with him for so many years that I understand what it's like. And and so for I think it's just a really, you use the words subs I'm going to screw that word up. I'm going to pull a Chris Simpson to mangle it. Um, Say the word for me. So
uh, Substantial, substantive.
substantive. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would have mangled that somehow. But yeah, to have that, and it is substantive. You mean you're talking about just be. I mean, and any Al who's going to go out on tour, they should all take it. They should all be taking a note here, and kind of almost change, because not only does it give the fan a better, a more meaningful moment, it is a better way to make more money. It
Yeah.
is. Like, I
And
mean, if you don't worry about the meet and greet beforehand, or because typically meet and greets beforehand are due to the venue that you're at. They're they're usually something with the venue that you're with, and they've set up some sort of meet and greet, and those people come in. That's usually not in your control, or in the artist's control. So um, sometimes it is, because like they know somebody's coming, they give them tickets and passes. But the idea that I'm going to perform, and then afterwards I'm going to take my time, I'm going to clean up, and then I'm going to come out and I'm going to sit with people and chill. I'm not going to have to stand. I'm just going to sit with people and chill and talk to them, and I'm going to charge them extra. Is a It's a pretty good construct of an idea.
and it's a great idea. And two other quick things. One, I knew it was going to be good the first time I did it, even before it started, because I could just tell. And I've never met. This is all just Ron the fan talking, and Tara, who works with them as the manager, was exceptional to those. Like, again, the show just happened. uh, you don't have to use too much imagination to imagine all the work that goes into pulling off the show at the level it happened. And then she was just so professional, courteous, friendly, warm, made it seem as if we were the most important people in the theater, when that is absolutely not true, but that's how she made it seem. I could just tell. I was like, wow, this is actually going to be good. Like, it set the tone before Mike even entered the picture, which is just so cool. And I think the other thing about it, and I won't give it too much away, but one of the things Mike will do is he'll ask you to guess. You mentioned there's 4 flavors, David. He'll ask you to guess which one's his favorite. I'm not going to tell you that answer, but I
So
was able
obvious.
to.
It's such an obvious one.
Correct, correct. And that's what I told him. I was like, well, that's a pretty easy one based on the fact that you also named them. So anyway, but it was just, I can't say enough good things about it. It brought back great memories to see that picture in the issue.
Yeah.
Of
Well, and I like that you brought up Tara's name. She's wonderful. She truly cares about what she's doing, and I've watched her so many different ways in backstage settings where, yeah, it is her job to do what she does. She's a facilitator. But you're right. She brings a certain warm intention to her work, that speaks to why she's so good at what she does. Yeah, she's pretty cool.
there are Hall of Fame acts where you go to the show and it's like, okay, here comes the agenda song or two, where it might be, my wife worked on this record, and it's a force. And like, I mean, there was one act that I was going to for a while where like they would do the agenda thing, agenda song with like a great deep cut that everyone wanted to hear, is like, you know, okay, forgive us, we had to play that, but here you go, back to our stuff. Some Summer is absolutely not that. Some Summer fits perfectly into the set where it's placed.
It does, and I can't quite remember when I went in June where it was placed, but it's I've been a fan of Christians for many years now. He's had different names through like the last handful of years, where he's Blue by Blue or something at one point. He's by his own name at one point. Then he changed to something else. And there's been really interesting music. I wasn't sure what to expect when I heard he was releasing a solo album. I was happened to drive. I was last October, over a year ago, so 2023. Yeah, October 2023. I was driving up to Raleigh, so I was going to be on the road for a couple of hours, 2.5 to 3 hours. I put that in the car with some other CDs, and for whatever reason, I said, "Well, I'll put this in first. I'll hear it, and then I'll swap out to Moody Blues or something." And I left it in the entire ride. I just was surprised by it. I couldn't help but feel like I was listening to something brand new from the 90s. And it reminded me of so many different things, nothing specific, but I kept feeling like I was hearing bits of Crowded House, bits of Lindsey Buckingham, bits of Coldplay, bits of U2, bits of, I mean, it was Howard, what's the guy's name? No one is to blame. I can't think. Howard, oh, not Howard Hughes, not Howard Stern, Howard, he's 80 fella. It's horrible. Oh, I'm getting old.
You might have written it. I'm looking. You might have written it in here.
But he had so many different influences, and some that I even thought that I heard that he didn't even mention. And so, in the packaging, but I just felt like it seemed, and I still love listening to the album. You can let it play, and it just goes from the last song into the beginning again, and it just doesn't seem like the album ends. And I don't want it to end, and that's rare. It's rare, and for me, it is. Where I love music, but just to go through an entire album and just keep thinking, there's one or two tracks that I don't like as much as the others, but I just love the cycle. I love the cycle, and it just speaks to, it's just good songwriting, and it's good execution, and it's good mix. It's just a little bit of everything. And I'll tell you though, I'm gonna be a little critical of Christian. I wish that Christian allowed himself to be more into it, not just in performance on stage with his dad and the band, but the music video of Some Summer. There's these moments where he's just sitting and and it's like, and he did this too, because I became really aware of it when he worked on the Add Some Music to Your Day project that I did, that included him. He just filmed himself sitting on the couch. And it's like, dude, allow yourself to get into this sound that you're projecting, especially with Some Summer. I mean, look at your dad. I mean, I hate to say that, because it's like, I don't want him to be like his father, but from the perspective of, your father goes out and says, I'm going to celebrate joy every single night if I could do it, just allow that, make that happen, get into that, lean in, the song is this fun, some summer song, lean into the fun part of it. And he seems to be a little too serious with, not on the record, because you don't pick that up, but in terms of the performance, he still seems a little not robotic, but a little not as loose as the song suggests. And I think it would really serve him well if he gave that some consideration. The idea of this song, how do I present myself to go with the feeling, right? That's a big component to anything, to selling something, to sell. I mean, again, look at what your father did in a group that sold the summer to the world.
Yeah.
I mean, lean into it. If you're going to project this fun in the sun imagery, then you're going to have to lean in. You're going to have to smile. You're going to have to be joyful, because that's what you've written. You don't have to, because it does fit the set list, But buddy, it
Yeah.
would sure go a long way if you did it, because
Yeah.
the energy, the audience would pick up on that. You know, I mean, you look at Keith Hubacher is a great example. If you watch Keith Hubacher interacting with John Bolton in the back corner of the stage, those two guys are having the time of their lives. And if they're not, they sure got me fooled,
Right.
because they're looking at each other and being crazy and fun, and they're smiling the whole time. And it's like, okay, that's the energy. And
Even
Mike's digging the Mike, and I think that's bringing back this energy to Mike because he's having so much fun off of them.
even Tim Bonhomme on the keyboard, like he's been doing that for how long? There's the joy in the delivery as if it's his first time.
Yeah,
Not the, he's obviously the playing is expertise, but there's not an ounce of boredom that comes through.
no,
And that's
you being
rare.
goofy back there. You see him being goofy and having,
Yeah.
and that's I would just suggest to people of any age that's kind of a lesson. That's a life
Yeah.
lesson. It's just to have a good time.
I think that brings us to a pretty good summation point for this first one. But I think one of the things I jotted down, and it was in one of the issues, but just it struck me is, and I'll focus it on the principles, but it really applies well beyond that. But you're the history and the pages, and you look at the times, and it's easy to take for granted where in the world this band was traveling in the time they were traveling it in the 60s, and said like it was a troubled time in the world, and this band was going all over the world and doing what it was doing. And I think in one of the Mike talks about, hey, we could have we weren't looking to go Bob Dylan. That was we were going to be kind of like, okay, antidote to that in a way, like just. And I think the universal need for that positivity, and John Stamos says it when he's up there in the concert, but it would be true whether he said it or not. But I think it is true. You think about all the places in the world then and now, how complex, and you really do see a resiliency because of that kind of purpose and that message. And it to me, it comes through and reminds you of these things, and gives small joys, small wins all the time, whether I'm listening to an album of a studio version, whether I'm in a concert soaking it in, whether I'm reading through the pages and along my, like, it's all the different forms. But it is certainly something where it's more relevant than ever in some ways. The notion that you talked about it, selling the summer. Well, how about an endless summer? Yeah, that sounds familiar, right? Like, who wouldn't sign up for that right now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do live in a time that I think fun and kindness and joy are really important. Um, and and thanks to, I will say thanks to all of the principles, but but again, we touched on it. If not for Dennis Wilson, we wouldn't have had the suggestion. If not for Brian Wilson and Mike Love creating the idea spawned by Dennis, if not for all the peripheral figures who came into play in those early formative years, whether it be Murray Wilson, Audrey Wilson for teaching her boys boogie woogie on the piano, um, Audrey for coming up with, dogs pick up vibrations. I mean, on and on and on. I mean, it's a group that deserves the accolades they receive, and I love them all.
Well said. I've got a lot more questions for future programs for you, and hopefully all of you joining us enjoyed this. Hopefully we can bring our own version of some joy into your experiences. That is one of our goals, while also scratching some curiosities, and maybe sharing some knowledge and some curiosity. So David, thank you. This has been a blast.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. We'll have more to come soon.
More to come on Good Vibrations, a Beach Boys program. For David Beard, Ron Vaccaro, thanks so much for joining us.